little chunker. If you're struggling to catch them down here, just throw you a weightless worm. They always eat it. It's a chunky, that's probably a female fish. You always want to look for that in Florida. When you're catching like healthier, chunky fish, even if they're not a big fish, that's obviously not a giant, but that's probably a female, which means there could be a lot of bigger fish moving into this area, not just a little buck bass. So when it comes to Florida fishing, I struggled for years because I'm like not that Florida's not power fisherman, but I'm like a super fast power fisherman. And when it comes to Florida, just these lakes in general, a lot of fish get in one area, but it can be hard to get them to bite. You kind of just stick your power poles down and drag around. And one of the staple baits for Florida, if you're struggling, if you just need to get bites, is just a stick bait. I mean, generally I'll wacky rig it sometimes if vegetation is not too thick. This is just a fusion hook, just Texas rig style. But you can get in an area, like this little area here, you get a bite. Say you get 1 or 2 bites in the area. Stick your poles down, get your weightless worm out, and just fan cast and milk it all. And there's generally in Florida, if there's any fish, there's a lot of fish. And a weightless stick bait style bait will almost always catch them. May not be the best option, but it will tell you how many's there. You can just drag it around and pick it apart really slowly with it. So with a weightless worm, I mean, the retrieve's really almost like nothing. I mean, I'll throw it out there, let it sink to the bottom. Generally, you're in shallow water. I mean, less than 5 foot, so it doesn't take that long even being weightless. But I'll just kind of drag it along, get it up in the water column a little bit so it can get that flutter back down. And the one thing you want to make sure is you are fishing it very slow. If you do get some vegetation, some kind of little bitty grass hung up around the hook, you want to make sure you realize that. If it feels a little too heavy, just kind of give it like a jiggle or pop to get it out. And just really, it's almost a do-nothing presentation. That's what makes it so effective in these Florida-style lakes like this. A little bit better one. Oh. On the stick bait. Just dragging through the grass. Fold one, it's a little chunky one. Your hook size can vary, but this is just a 4/0 kind of general size. You can go smaller, and some with larger baits you can go bigger. But this 4/0 is pretty good starting point. When you're throwing this weightless worm in the grass too, I do not like a wide gap hook because with it being so weightless and kind of if it gets one little piece of grass on it, the presentation's not really that good. So just a regular offset worm hook style doesn't have much to catch grass as you're dragging it. You want to try to get it as straight as possible to keep it from twirly burden as you're pulling it back. When you're fishing with a weightless stick bait style, they're pretty light. I mean, that's the nature of it being a weightless bait. It's a little difficult to cast, present, so you want the right setup to be able to effectively get it out there without backlashing and get it where you want it. So I like a medium heavy action rod. This is a 7.3, this is in my line of arc rods. It's a do-all. And it's kind of it's got a little bit of tip to it, which makes it easier to present, yet it has enough backbone to hook them because you still got a single large hook on there that you have to drive through. So I use a 7.3 medium heavy. Line can vary. You generally don't want to go super heavy, anywhere from 12, 16 pound tests, something like that in that range. I mean, obviously 12 may get more bites and be a little bit easier cast, but if you've got some pads around and stuff, you might want to step it up to about 16. So it's not a specific setup, it's more how you can present the bait the most effectively. Not a giant, but he hit it hard. Stole my cricket. So a lot of times to get bit when you're using this stick bait like this, it's it's really difficult to get bit when you're moving, especially if it's kind of windy. It generally is windy in Florida. If you're moving, you're not presenting that bait effectively because not dragging it slow enough. You're kind of dragging it 3 or 4 times and reeling it back. So I like to drop the power poles, fan cast an area, pick them up. This is when you know there's fish in the area. If there's no fish in the area, obviously it's not gonna work. But you know there's fish there, you drop the power poles, fan cast around, and then move about 20, 30 yards, drop them down again and fan cast it all. It's slow, it's kind of tedious sometimes, but you'll get way more bites doing that than you will trolling through, then trolling back through if you know it's a good area. You just kind of got to milk it apart. So when you're getting on these big shallow flats in Florida, there's always hot spots on it, and obviously you know it's a hot spot when you start catching them. But even outside of that, you want to use your eyes, use your coasters, use your sunglasses, and really get an idea of what's going on. Like, that's the good thing about Florida. If you got good clear water, you always know what's going on in the water because you can see the empty beds or beds with fish on them, or eelgrass, hydrilla, the pad stems, just what's going on. You'll know when you get in a life type area because it just looks different, looks better. You see bright spots, things like that.